Everybody, welcome back to the Badgerland Birding Podcast, bringing you birding news and stories from the Badger State and beyond. Today, we're with Erik Bruhnke, who does a lot of touring with Victor Emmanuel Nature Tours and is based out of Minnesota. He's a super nice guy. We call him the Bob Ross of birding, so we're pumped to be able to talk to him today. How's it going, Erik?
Wonderful, wonderful. Happy to be here with you guys.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks so much for taking the time. The first time that I heard about you, well, I think Derek mentioned you actually before, but it was at the biggest week. Everyone was like, "Oh yeah, you gotta meet this Erik guy. He's like the nicest guy ever." And I kind of immediately was like, "There's no way. He's probably awful. He's actually probably a jerk." And then I met you, and I was like, "I get it. I get why everyone likes him so much."
You definitely do have just an aura of positive energy, like anytime that I see you. Just positively excited about, whatever bird news is going on. So it's
Right. I
great.
mean, it definitely is fun to have fun with birding. And I don't mean that in any cliche way, but it's one of those things where, hey, birds make you happy, show it, have a good time. And it's fun, especially when we've met, from past experiences like at Biggest Week, Rio Grande Valley Birding Festival, and so on. It's fun to come together and share that happiness together, most definitely.
Well,
Yeah.
also because you're a Wisconsin guy too, so that
Mhm.
makes it even more so of a connection. That you're repping the Door County shirt, and
Yeah.
now you live up in Duluth, right?
Right, right. Actually, I have to say too, of my various birding experiences and travels and upbringing in Wisconsin, I just had my Life for Door County experience actually this summer. We had a family get together, and I was like, this is long overdue as far as the Door County experience, and left seeing a little gull up there, which was a fun treat. Met
Ooh.
some other birders up there. And of course, too, part of the experience was leaving with some Door County cherries. So currently in my freezer, I've got several pounds of blocks of tart local Door County cherries from there.
Oh,
It's
nice,
pretty
very
special,
nice.
yeah.
Yeah, and for anybody that doesn't know Wisconsin, it kind of has that shape like this with, yeah, the thumb is where Door County is. So a lot of rare stuff and cool birds end up on that point. There's actually an island called Washington Island, which people that live there who are birders report some pretty crazy things. So it's definitely a unique part of the state to go birding in. And it's very, I would say like quaint. It has a quaint vibe to it. A lot of people go there for vacation. The lake is obviously there, so it's a cool
It's a
location.
big tourist destination as well.
Yep,
Yeah.
we were there in the winter time a couple of times actually.
Hmm.
So we got very thrush up there. That was cool. Pine grosbeaks, snow buntings were neat.
Oh,
Yeah.
very cool. That was one thing that surprised me during my summer visit. And I'd heard and just kind of for fun researched about the ecology up there, and it's long known, among just naturalists of all sorts that Door County is a very unique area among its latitude in Wisconsin, kind of boreal forest almost in some ways. And it was cool keeping a little Airbnb list where my family rented, kind of tucked down this dead end road, and it was fun to have like black-throated green warbler singing first thing in the morning with indigo buntings and this cool juxtaposition of a variety of other birds too that made me think, oh, it's almost more Northwoods than it actually is located at. So it's
Yeah.
Yeah,
pretty
that's
neat,
true.
to say the
Did
least.
you leave your Airbnb host a note like, hey, these are all the birds that are at your property? You could use this to promote it. Be like, hey, come
Yeah, there
stay
you
with
go.
us.
Yeah.
We got black-throated green warbler on the
That's right.
property.
That's right.
So you just got back from Brazil recently doing a tour out there, and that's a place we've never been. Can you tell us a bit about what that was like?
Yeah, so been back for just under a week at this point. And first off, here in Duluth, where I live, throughout the year, we're having a nice kind of early fall or late summer, whatever it is right now. Cool front come through. I think today it's not even breaking 70 degrees as the day high, and it's kind of a break from the hot weather that we had in Brazil, which is seasonal and typical for this time of year. But focusing back on Brazil, so I do back-to-back tours every year, starting off at Iguaçu Falls, which is a little of the slightly interior, slightly southeastern part of Brazil. Basically, it's one of the where it's one of the world's spectacles, one of the iconic spectacles of the world. Essentially, it's tier after tier after tier of waterfalls that are interconnected. And the hotel where we stay happens to be within a moment walking distance of one of the scenic vistas of this falls. There's this cool swift species called Great Dusky Swift, and they nest in masses behind the waterfall. So it's cool to see them kind
Oh,
of
neat.
roosting there.
That's gotta
And
be a really cool site.
yeah, it was really neat. And so that's That's a much shorter, what we call a pre-trip, kind of a little pre-trip for birding Brazil, and we do some forest birding and some riverside birding too. And then, in addition to the scenic spectacle, the bulk of my experience with V.E.N.T there in Brazil is what's called the Pantanal, which is the world's largest freshwater wetland, and it's essentially masses of wetlands. Some are a little drier, and what's called cerrado, which is essentially it's like a Brazilian savanna almost, where you have expanses of grassland, shrub type landscape with a few trees scattered here and there, welcoming all sorts of birds, and also caiman, which is, like
Ooh.
alligator crocodile type. And anyways, as we bird our way down into the Cerrado and down into the heart of this wetland called the Pantanal, the highlights of the tour truly are extraordinary. On a morning by morning basis, especially once we were in the Pantanal, basically birding by boat day after day. We were averaging 100 or more species on some single mornings alone of just taking a little 4 or 5 hour boat ride up and down rivers. And two of the premier highlights from us, from an iconic standpoint of what makes the Pantanal so unique, is seeing hyacinth macaws, which are a relatively scarce macaw species, largest macaw in the world. They're known for being a deep, this is slightly in the shade of the blue, but imagine this with a more electric, deep ocean shade of blue. It's a really gorgeous bird with yellow in the face. And we saw them on several occasions throughout our travels. And then beyond the birds, one of the other really special highlights was seeing jaguars. And how we do it V.E.N.T style is we actually stay on a floating hotel. It's like a luxurious end-to-end barge that has been converted into one half is essentially luxury rooms, other half is where you dine, kind of a common area. And then day by day, we go birding by boat up and down the river from our floating home base.
That sounds
And
like the coolest experience ever, especially when you said it's a luxury floating
I'm
base.
rambling. It is so fun. It is so fun. And
Here's that macaw. That's
well, please
beautiful.
do. Yeah.
Wow. That thing looks incredible.
Yeah, and there's different macaw species. We saw a few different species. Some are larger, some are smaller, but this is the largest in the world. So to see them flying, in general, here's my inner hawk watcher coming out. The bigger the bird, the slower they flap. Smaller the bird, the faster they flap for any kind of bird that flies. And so when you see these hyacinth macaws flying by, it's like slow, majestic wing beats. I mean, they're a large, robust macaw species, which is a treat to see within itself. And once again, this is so exciting to even talk about with you guys. So jaguars are one of the premier highlights of our trip, and collectively throughout our Pantanal tour, identified by different patterns, different rosettes throughout their back, we had between 13 and 14 different jaguars, like individual cats, totaling 16 different sightings altogether. And so it was quite special to see jaguars on numerous occasions, including we actually had a mother with two kittens at one point.
Oh,
And we also got to see a jaguar stealthily, casually swimming not too far from our boat, safe distance from our boat, going through kind of the reedy edges of the river. And all of a sudden it decided to pounce into some of the greenery. And as it pounced, we saw a caiman tail lash up. And after about probably no more than 20 seconds of fighting, we saw this jaguar come up with a caiman that was grasped in its mouth, basically, and it carried the caiman off into the woods to make a meal of it. So we actually saw an active kill happen right in front of us too, which even by being in this lucky area to see jaguars is not an expected thing whatsoever.
yeah, that's
That's
crazy.
Did you guys ever feel unsafe with the Jaguars, or was it always a safe distance?
No, well, so Derek, this is a very valid question too. We would absolutely never do anything that's even remotely unsafe or of concern. And the Jaguars have basically it is an actual wilderness area. It's not like an area where they are, enticed to be there. Basically, there's a healthy population of caiman, the Yacaré caiman, and there's also a healthy population of capybaras, which are these
Oh man,
big,
that's so
chunky.
cool.
They're adorable. They got this little sleepy-eyed look, big schnoz. They're really cool. World's largest rodent, and basically capybaras and caiman happen to make up a significant source of the jaguar's food base. And so we have both prey items on these riverways and always giving the jaguar their space. Like the jaguars are more focused on either sleeping throughout the day or the occasional hunt on the river edges, but the boats always give them the right of way and plenty of space. So to answer your question, there was never any concern at all. We just kind of, well, it's pretty cool just to kind of stay in place. And one of the other treats too, from both a birding standpoint, but also for people that like photography on our tours down there, is the people that we hire to run our boats up and down these river, these much smaller kind of low profile boats. It's amazing that they can wiggle these boats out of nooks and crannies, so that we can actually be in line with the cat for like minutes on end, fully giving the cat some space and never having any concern about, oh, we're drifting away or anything. You know, it makes for a kind of a surreal viewing experience, both birding and photography alike.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like that's the kind of stuff too that you see on National Geographic or documentaries on Discovery Channel. You know, I think I've seen one about the Pantanal actually before too, talking about the jaguars and the caimans and everything. So it sounds like you got to live your Discovery Channel moment, and it sounds like you do on a regular basis with all the places you go.
I feel really fortunate, Ryan. Yeah. Yeah, after the attack happened on the Cayman, for me personally, it was one of those things, and I mean this too, to compliment exactly what you're talking about. I remember some like there's the old saying, "Your jaw is on the floor" kind of thing, and actually remember actually like an inner gasp of just like, holy crap, like speechless. And I remember looking in the back of the boat, seeing, is everyone blissfully smiling or are they in like wow shock as well? And it was just like this, like, holy cow, what just happened kind of experience for all of us. So we were very grateful to see what we had seen. And once again, the entire experience is exclusively safe distance from the cats. So it's pretty magical, just that alone, in addition to the masses of different bird life that we come across too in that part of Brazil.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely incredible. Um, how many tours do you do with V.E.N.T throughout the course of the year? Because I feel like you're constantly out in some cool part of the world.
Yeah, actual numbers of tours, I actually don't know off the top of my head if it's around maybe, I don't know if it'd be 14, maybe a little more or less. On average, I'm on the road about 110, 115 days of touring each year, and grateful to be part of the V.E.N.T team as far as these experiences, and wholeheartedly mean this too. Having these opportunities to show people, such amazing experiences as well that enrich their lives. Truly, it's a very mutual, special feeling to have these moments together.
Yeah, for sure. And then with the being up in Duluth, you guys have the incredible hawk migrations. Can you tell us a little bit about the stuff you do with Hawk Ridge?
Yeah, so Hawk Ridge, for those of you who might be new to hawk watching, Hawk Ridge is a long known hawk migration site in the city of Duluth, northeastern Minnesota, where I'm speaking from. And it's one of the longer going hawk watches in the country, among like Hawk Mountain and in Pennsylvania. Cape May, New Jersey is another spot where a long going hawk watch is. And there's several other ones that are also, from a data standpoint, long going. Hawk Ridge has been collecting data for over 50 years from one bluff that overlooks Lake Superior. And to answer your question, basically what goes on an every fall basis is this beautiful spectacle of migration. I'm saying this being a migration junkie. It's single biggest and happiest thing in my life, truly, on a year-by-year basis, is to witness migration and just be in awe of the spectacle that comes through. And that's one of the reasons why Hawk Ridge in particular averages, depending on the year, maybe 40 to 80,000 raptors every fall. Some years it's a little bit fewer. Some years it might exceed that, just depends on the year. But it's magnitudes of raptors that come through. In addition to that, there's an average of over 200,000 non-raptors that fly through the Hawk Ridge viewing area every fall as well. And essentially what causes this immense migration to fly through the Hawk Ridge area has to do with the topography. So we were just talking about Door County, once again, like the thumb of Wisconsin. Minnesota has what's called the Arrowhead region, which basically Minnesota as a whole, it looks like, kind of like an upright block. you can't really show this with the hands, but basically northeastern Minnesota has like an elongated stretch of land. It's a large stretch of land that blends into what's called the boundary waters. Okay. So what happens is where the shore of Lake Superior meets this angled arrowhead region of Minnesota, there's miles and miles and miles of this water meets land border. And thermal activity, which is when the sun heats up the ground, you end up with air that's essentially displaced and rising faster than the ambient air around it. Thermals form over land, but not over large bodies of water. So every fall, in a nutshell, there's hundreds of thousands of birds that are looking to fly south from the Arctic, from kind of the central prairies of central Canada, much of the boreal forest of Canada, and just through circumstance of this downward funnel along like the Great Lakes Flyaway, as they call it, Mississippi Flyaway, if you will, many of them happen to funnel down the western side of Lake Superior into the Duluth vicinity. So the reason why Hawk Ridge exists as a renowned hawk watching site is all because of the shoreline, essentially. And when we have weather conditions, oftentimes it's favored to be out of the west or northwest winds. Those winds will push more birds and funnel more birds into the shoreline, creating even larger days of migration on a day-by-day basis.
That sounds really wild, to be honest. So do they have a full kind of visitor center on Hawk Ridge? Is it a place a lot of people go regularly if they're just birders, or is it mostly people that are actually part of the counts that are there?
It's both, actually. First off, the birding community of Duluth is pretty cool. It's fun to see a lot of locals on a day-by-day basis. Some are new to birding. Many are avid birders who have been coming to Hawk Ridge since maybe their earliest years of getting into birds. And basically, truly, Hawk Ridge is all are welcomed. The more the merrier. You know, it's a very special place to be. And there's so Hawk Ridge, first of all, is a nonprofit. They've been uh, well through a connection of Duluth Audubon. They've been kind of working together to manage the land and also run these counts that are taking place. And basically, on a season by season basis, there's paid staff. So there's a few naturalists. When I worked for Hawk Ridge, my first bunch of years out of college and after college too, I was what's called a count interpreter. In a nutshell, a bird pointer outer guy is what my job was. So getting people on birds, just pointing up birds all day long and teaching about how to tell that bird is what they are. There's a lot of volunteers, and actually Hawk Ridge prides itself being a nonprofit in and its volunteer base, and it's really cool to see so many people coming both locally, but even from around the country to spend part of the fall in Duluth for just getting people excited about birds and helping Hawk Ridge is what it is. So
That's cool. So what
yeah,
you're saying is we could go up there and watch hawks.
exactly,
That
exactly.
sounds just great because I know
Yeah,
somebody who still needs a northern goshawk on their life list. Well, I guess American goshawk now, but
no
formerly
chance.
That's
northern
true. Yeah.
goshawk.
Yeah, who is that by chance?
That guy.
Oh,
I
oh,
got
Derek.
one.
Well,
It came down to Horicon Marsh and it was hanging out by this pheasant farm that was there. So I saw it for 30 seconds and then it took off. So that's how I got my lifer. American goshawk, but it would
wow.
be cool to see one flying through. I'm assuming you get them not necessarily super regularly, but somewhat regularly at Hawk Ridge.
Yeah, as far as the goshawk go, and I have to also double think too, American goshawk.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, Hawk Ridge, one of the neat spectacles about Hawk Ridge is where its proximity is to the boreal forest. So, so here's the scoop with goshawks and with a lot of kind of North Woods species. Many of these birds funnel down towards Hawk Ridge, but the likelihood of seeing certain boreal species, like far northern forest type species, may be a little greater in the Duluth area than they are throughout like the rest of the central Wisconsin, central Minnesota area. And this is a very generalized statement too, but specifically with American goshawk, Hawk Ridge's numbers of American goshawk typically outnumber Cooper's hawks on an annual basis.
really. Well, that's
Wow.
very enticing.
It's
Yeah.
quite special. And just like with any raptor migration, the numbers vary season by season. Eruptions happen once in a while too. And I would say if you're looking to see goshawk, they can show up in like late September. They often do just a few, but by far, if you're looking to have your best chances of goshawk, and for Derek, for you, Ryan, and also truly for everyone listening out there, middle to late October, typically when you have to bundle up, usually at this northern area, middle to late October is when they tend to peak in migration into early November. And the timing of that, especially if you happen to visit during a cool front or when the winds are out of the west, it's going to feel cool oftentimes with the wind chill and all. But without a doubt, that's from a week by week standpoint, your most likely chance of seeing them. And also too, one thing I didn't mention, but just to kind of get ahead of the game, is that Hawk Ridge season extends beyond September and October. It starts middle of August and goes into November. But the catch about when naturalists are interpreting, pointing out things, educating at Hawk Ridge, that starts September 1st and goes through Halloween, last day of October. So those 2 months in particular, if you're looking to get the most out of your experience, not only when on average the most birds tend to fly through, but also for your sake of maybe benefiting a little bit by someone on site helping, directing, just interpreting of what's going on. Those 2 months are a little more involved from a Hawk Ridge education standpoint. And once again, latter half of October is the best time for goshawk.
So during that time, people can just show up and there's people on site counting and they can be like, what's this? Like, or I'm looking for this. So all that's just going on if people show up to Hawk Ridge.
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool. And up at Hawk Ridge too, if you've never been to Hawk Ridge, so Duluth as a whole, it's a pretty cool, pretty scenic city. It's some people call it the San Francisco of the Midwest in kind of a goofy
I don't know
manner.
how I feel about that.
It's a well, it's a meant in a good way. I'm talking about
Oh,
topography
okay.
here
All
with
right.
the
All
slope.
right.
And it's really neat in that it's essentially a big topographical slope leading down into Lake Superior, mixed boreal forest. You got some bogs on the outside of town. There's even some lakes and ponds not too far from here. Even little mini like cascading creeks, I guess you could say, even in the town limits. It's very scenic. A lot of green space is still intact. And the view from Hawk Ridge in particular is extra scenic. It's along a road called Skyline Parkway, which is this meandering road that kind of hugs the upper limits of Duluth, and it's got numerous scenic bluffs here and there. It's also where the spring hawk count takes place on the west side of town. So just talking about Hawk Ridge being a nonprofit also runs a spring hawk watch more on the western part. But the more well-known area from a counting standpoint is the Fall Hawk Watch. Everyone's invited to both of them, of course. They see outstanding flights in the spring as well. And just going on with our conversation though, so in the fall, usually it's late September, maybe into the first week or two of October, typically is when fall colors can really be visible. It might vary depending on the timing of the cold fronts and all, but the view from kind of having a vista overlooking Lake Superior, fall colors, it's pretty hard to beat at a place like Hawk Ridge.
Yeah, I can believe that. And Duluth is a very interesting city topographically, like you're saying, because it's right across the river from Superior. So Superior is a city in Wisconsin and is very industrial. It's more on the flat side. And then as soon
Mhm,
as you cross over, you see the houses are kind of on almost like shelves. It looks
mhm.
as though it's a descending sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like how they do the farming. Do you know what
Like a
I'm talking about?
terrace kind of
Yeah,
deal.
almost
Yeah.
terraced. They're kind of terraced out in an interesting way. And then you have Superior right there. So you have this big lake on one side, and then this almost mountainous, hilly plateau on your left side, which is very unique. And it should be worth mentioning too that Saxon Bog is not that far away from Duluth too. So a lot of times people coming to the bog will stay in Duluth. So secret
Mhm.
birding gem of the Midwest, would you say, Eric?
It's pretty special. It's pretty special. We could do a whole podcast on on Saxon Bog.
I mean,
It's
you've
it's
you've the
quite special.
Boundary Waters there too. So it's like
Mhm.
a bunch of gems kind of like lined up in that area.
And that
Could
drive up
you
to the boundary bars, you do get those creeks. I know exactly what you're talking
You guys
about,
know
the
where.
cascading creeks. Yeah, you just see rock and then water just pouring out of the rocks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Eric.
and
Oh,
go ahead.
sorry. Could you
Yeah.
give us just a general like if you say you go mid-October, what are the species you're probably going to see there? And like in what numbers might you expect to see them? Is it like
Mhm.
20 Cooper's Hawks, 100 American Goshawks? Like what kind of numbers are we looking at?
Just on a
Well,
basic average, not
Yeah, just kind
necessarily
of
accounting
like,
for any
ooh.
craziness.
a
Well,
handful of
my
whatever.
my inner birding guide is saying never to promise anything from a number standpoint
Not a
or
promise,
yeah.
an
We're noting
estimate.
it's not a
Yeah,
promise.
yeah.
Definitely not a
Yeah.
promise.
So if you were to visit in mid-October or late October, bald eagles are going to be coming through typically in good numbers by then. There's actually two waves of bald eagles. There's some bald eagles that come through more in September, but there's definitely a significant wave, nice push. Sometimes kettles and kettles of bald eagles. Kettle is a group of raptors, first of all, kind of soaring together. And so kettles of bald eagles can be seen mid to late October in good numbers. Golden eagles. A
Mm.
lot of times you think of golden eagles as more of a Western mountainous species, or if you're in the far Northeast, more of an Eastern mountain species. But from a birding standpoint, you don't think of a lot of them as coming down through the Midwest. And there's actually areas, kind of south central Minnesota, where they overwinter, actually, which is pretty cool. And so when the golden eagles are coming through, again, it's kind of the latter half of October, smaller numbers, but they do come through for sure. Goshawks are not a daily sighting, but as far as if you happen to be at Hawk Ridge, especially with good northwestern conditions, that's going to be some of your greatest chances to see a goshawk. Or sometimes when we get eruptive years or bigger years, sometimes we'll even hit double digits in a single day if it is a bigger year. So just something to note that they can be a little more regular when the conditions in the year are right for them. Red-tailed hawks are another bird. So I know a lot of listeners of your podcast are frequent birders. Safe to say, whether it's backyard birding or especially beyond too. It's part of what we do. And red-tailed hawks in particular, I personally feel are one of the most beautiful raptors in North America. I also feel that they're one of the most underappreciated. This is just my own self angle on it, but I feel like a lot of times as a birder, some people might go into the pitfall or the experience of, oh, it's just a red-tailed hawk. And even to my friends when we're out birding, if I hear like, oh, just it's like, come on now, we're not gonna say just let's take some time to enjoy that.
I think it's because they like to be along the freeway so much.
Yeah, well, they got mice to hunt, they got things to get. So here's the scoop about red-tailed hawks during October. So what will happen, especially middle of October, is you get these nice waves of red-tailed hawks that are coming through. And Hawk Ridge is unique in that, once again, it's along boreal forests, but also prairies. And where these two ecosystems form like kind of an intermingled kind of fusion of habitats, you end up with different varieties of red-tailed hawks. Every year on an annual basis, we see criters, red-tailed hawks in small numbers, which are the very pale form of red-tailed hawk that comes from like the prairie pothole region west of us. Northwest of us, I should say. Every year, mostly more in October into into late October, mid-October, we see Harlan's red-tailed hawks. It's a really cool, unique form of red-tailed hawk. Comes in a light form and a dark form. That's a whole different topic too. But it's a cool form of red-tailed hawk that's unique to what northwestern Canada and Alaska where they breed, and they come through. And then we also see this really special form of red-tailed hawk called a beta cola. And if you're into the avid raptor data scene and kind of raptor science scene, it's called a beta cola, or what's called Canadian red-tailed hawk. And basically this northern form of red-tailed hawk, it's really pretty. You guys would see them in southern Wisconsin, mostly in the winter when they come through, but they nest, they're kind of a northern Great Lakes areas and north of the Great Lakes. And essentially they have unusually bold belly bands, very darkly marked underwings, and they tend to have some degree of orange blush in their chest.
Hmm.
But it's and new to science, they actually come in a light and dark form too, which is pretty cool.
It's funny
And
when
this
the
is actually,
subspecies itself
yeah,
comes in a light and a
and
dark form.
this is actually discovered at Hawk Ridge, believe it or not,
Really?
from tracking them with telemetry and realizing where are these dark morph red-tailed hawks going, and they're not all going to the west that one would think of being a western race. They're actually going in north of the Great Lakes where this Canadian form of red tail is. So long and the short, red-tailed hawks are really beautiful. They're quite variable. And without a doubt, Hawk Ridge is actually one of the premier places kind of in the Midwest to appreciate the different varieties of red-tailed hawks as they come through. We see mostly light morphs, but dark morphs come through sometimes, and also different regional varieties come through as well.
No, that's interesting.
Yeah,
You're the kind of guy that appreciates a good red-tailed hawk. I can just tell when you were starting to talk about them.
it's pretty fun. Yeah.
Is this the subspecies you were talking about?
There we go. There we go. So no, thank you for pulling that up too, Derek. So, the degree of orange blush in the chest is a little varied, but in general, they tend to be a little more boldly colored, and the dark areas tend to be a little extra bold, if you will, compared to maybe some lighter eastern, more typical eastern race red-tailed hawks that you might see, more year-round birds like in southern Wisconsin, for example. So, they're quite beautiful.
I think
Yeah, I'm
that
gonna have to look
red-tailed
out for
hawk,
that
Yeah.
subspecies.
Yeah,
red-tailed hawk
actually,
and dark-eyed junco, in my opinion, have to be the two species of common birds that have the most crazy different morphs based on region.
definitely. It's pretty wild, within one species, just how the color varieties work. It makes them all the more exciting too. Actually, with that being said too, even like the common Cooper's hawk, for example, that is seen throughout Duluth. It's definitely seen throughout Wisconsin and Minnesota, as kind of year-round birds. One thing that's kind of neat to note is throughout the Midwest and the eastern states, the Cooper's hawks that we see in our yards are going to be more lightly marked than Cooper's hawks like on the West Coast, where they actually see darker streaking. And so even at a place like Hawk Ridge, it's fun to appreciate, whether it's a rare raptor or common raptor, what makes that raptor that raptor. And the more raptors you see of a given species, you'll be able to see and recognize that's what that species is. But you'll also be able to see maybe this is what's unique about this individual. Maybe it looks a little different. Maybe that's why it's a different race red-tailed hawk, if you know what I mean. So it's part of the treasure
Mhm.
hunt of hawk watching is to not only appreciate the spectacle, but also appreciate maybe differences and variations within all the birds that are coming through.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think part of the reason people have kind of that, oh, it's just another red tail is because they can be a little confusing.
Hmm.
Because, sometimes it'd be like, oh, it's a rough-legged hawk. Like, oh, it's actually a dark morph red tail. And I feel like things that confuse people, they tend to not like gulls can be very confusing. So a lot of times people are like, ah, I don't want to deal with that. And I feel like red tails, the confusing aspect might make some people be like, they frustrate me.
Yeah.
I still think it's the freeway thing. I think, you go to the airport in Milwaukee and you'll see 6 or 7 of them along the freeway. So I think it's just one of those things where if it wasn't as common, I think people would be crazy about them. I think the same thing about red-winged blackbirds too. If people didn't see red-winged blackbirds all the time and saw them sparingly, they would think, "Wow, look at that thing. That's a crazy looking cool bird."
Right, right. We were talking about the latter half of October, and I could definitely list other species too. I mean, this could be a
Oh,
whole thing.
please do.
Oh
Please
yeah.
list other
Um,
species.
yeah, there's so like rough-legged hawks, for example. It's safe to say one of the top places in the upper Midwest to see rough-legged hawks migrating through is Hawk Ridge. Oftentimes, Whitefish Point and on the other end, the eastern side of Lake Superior sees significant numbers of rough-legged hawks as well in migration. And the rough-legged hawks, they typically start coming through. It's more like latter chunk of October into November. And just from a structural standpoint, they're a little like long-winged, long-tailed for a boodio, and so they're extra elegant and graceful when they flap. They're really fluid flapping compared to like a red tail's that a little more bounding with their wing profile. In addition to that, as we talked about the eagles that are coming through, osprey are long gone by the time that late October has come through. They're already, into more central southern states and even into the Gulf of Mexico possibly by then. And the tail end of sharpshin hawks could still be coming through. Typically, we'll get some coming through, and usually by late October, the sharpshin hawks that are coming through are mostly adults. And that's a common trend for a lot of raptors, is in general, you tend to see younger birds coming through in the earlier part of any window of time within that species, like window. And then as the migration progresses, you have more adult birds coming through in the latter parts. So usually by Halloween, the sharpshin hawks that are seen flying through, even though it's much fewer sharpshin hawks than like late September when they peak, the sharpshin hawks that you see are going to be like slaty headed, dark gray winged, red eyed, really, really sharp and contrastive looking, a little different than the juveniles, with the brown streaks down the front.
Yeah, definitely. The sharp shin talk.
They are sharp. They are sharp indeed.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
When
what else do you get other than the raptors too? Because there's a lot of different birds that make massive migrations fall and winter. What other stuff do you see very regularly?
Yeah, so there's a significant morning flight that takes place at Hawk Ridge every fall. And morning flight, for those who are new to the term, morning flight is essentially mostly, well, partially non or not nocturnal migrating birds that are flying by night. They're flying using the stars as an overhead map. They have a little internal compass called magnetite, and long and the short, they'll fly into the morning hours, typically in the first few hours of the early morning. And these waves of migrants coming through can be detected and with enough practice identified on the wing as they come through. And just like raptors coming through Hawk Ridge, there's significant morning flight that flies down the shore past Hawk Ridge. Once again, this on average 200,000 plus non-raptors that I talked about. Some are waterfowl, some are shorebirds. A lot of them are basically passerines of different kinds. And some mornings, a little bit later in the season, we'll get big flights of yellow-rumped warblers flying through. More so, into like early October, you might get waves of rusty blackbirds coming through, mixing with red-winged blackbirds. It's pretty cool, to see the rusty blackbirds and grackles mixing. Nice movements of cedar waxwings are happening currently right now, actually. Yeah, I mentioned cedar waxwings, American robins coming through. We're just on the early side of some of the earliest migrating warblers that are coming through, and basically week by week, the species seen are kind of evolving into the upcoming week, and there's almost always something to see on a week by week basis at Hawk Ridge. One of the other really special phenomenons that happens at Hawk Ridge and in the local area is common nighthawk migration.
Hmm.
And nighthawks in general, like they come through in fair numbers through a lot of the country within their range. And they're kind of like scattered, dispersed. You might see maybe a few of them. You might see a few dozen if it's a big afternoon. And I'll just say again, because of the topography of Lake Superior, we're fortunate to get these almost like super flights of common nighthawks that come through the area. And from 2 nights ago, we had basically a warm front come through, meeting a little bit of a western component wind, creating this perfect front of conditions for nighthawks to move through the area. And the night before, I remember looking up in the sky, and there was only hundreds upon hundreds of nighthawks flying through. And truly, and I mean this in all sincerity, it is one of those things where when you look up in the air, it does make you like a little like you're taken aback. It's okay to be watery-eyed. It's just darn cool because of how big the Nighthawk flights can be here. And so from 2 nights ago, I remember looking on this website called Directional, which I highly recommend visiting. You can track in real time all of Hawk Ridge's data as well as other Hawk counts data that enter into Directional. It's basically real-time streaming data. You can look at past days of sightings and so on. And minute by minute, hour by hour, they were seeing more and more from Hawk Ridge. And I remember looking at my phone briefly as the flight was picking up in the yard, like, oh, they've already had 5,000 and 7,000 at Hawk Ridge. And then my other friend, shout out to my friend Steve Colby too, who runs just kind of a little 2 week common nighthawk count up the shore, just a few minutes from here in Duluth. He had, I think at the time it was at 8,000 at the time, and the numbers are very similar, but the Nighthawks might take slightly different flight paths. And by the end of the evening, if I read this correctly, and I want to make sure I'm giving the numbers correctly, but I believe there was over 35,000 estimated Nighthawks collectively between these two sites from Tractellen. So actually, if you go to number 7 for a moment, Hawk Ridge Bird Observatory, what you guys are about to see is down to the minute. This is so cool. This is what's seen today at Hawk Ridge.
Oh, that's cool.
And yeah, and so they do, Hawk Ridge, like a lot of hawk watches, has prided itself with raptor data collection, but also non-raptors, because it is important to monitor everything to the best of one's ability, to look at trends. Are some species increasing, decreasing? Maybe looking at the windows. Are some birds maybe moving a little bit earlier, later in the season? So this is as of sunrise, and my friend Sean, Sean up there, he is the formal hawk hunter assisted with Marie this fall, and it's really cool. Both our friends from years past, and it's really cool just to see what's being collected on a day-by-day basis. And if you go to just above where it says observatory, you have different numbers of like the days. If you click, I guess that would be 26 now. Click on that, and so that day
Oh, yep.
yeah, so that was seen just from Hawk Ridge alone
I
from
like how
their.
it's bolded too. It's like, bam, look at these nighthawks.
Bold basically means it's a significant count, whether it's a rare sighting or a special high number. Um, so yeah.
Yeah,
So I
that's
guess, Derek,
crazy.
you could actually go look, change it to August, and go to a different year and see what happened in
Mhm.
October. I mean,
Yeah,
they even have.
Exactly. Actually, that's a great idea. If you go to October of last year and you click on any day kind of in the middle general time frame. This is awesome that we're doing this live too. Just to get a sense of, like, on the 18th of last October, they had a short-eared owl fly by, which is pretty darn cool.
yeah, that's neat.
Then there's
So if people want, you can go to Trektellen, TREKTELLEN. I believe is it .com?
it's
Trektellen.nl is what it has
it's
on
from the
here.
Netherlands, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah,
Um,
it's
you
I was
mentioned
talking.
it's a little different game identifying birds in flight. For someone who's not necessarily used to that, how fast do you pick up on that? Or does that take like years to get really good at saying, oh, that little warbler flying by, that was a, black-throated green warbler. Like how quickly can you pick up on that skill?
Well, I'm going to say I'm still learning. First of
Okay.
all, that's how
It's
I'd
not good
probably
news for the rest
address.
of us.
I
Not
need
good
to
news for
address
the
this.
rest of
Yeah,
us.
yeah. We are all learning. I am learning. I am very much learning. But it kind of gets in your blood the more you do it. And I mean that in that it basically just spending time at a hawk watch, or with another birding companion friend that knows how to look at birds on the wing. Like, for example, I'm just doing a shout out for my friend Scott Whittle, who is one of the creators, I should say, of the Warbler Guide. And uh, in creating this warbler guide, there's parts of the book that show warblers from basically the belly up, where you can look at the underbelly, undertail coverts, and looking at where is it patterned, where is it clean looking, where is it white versus yellow. And when looking at warblers in particular on the wing, it's noting, did you see a flash of little something in the wing bars or not? Did you happen to see streaking in the underside or not? This is split second stuff. And it takes an indefinite amount of practice and then some, because again, we're all learning. Um, but one of the things, or I should say, and one of the things too, is if you have a camera, it takes a lot of practice too. But if you're lucky enough to get some photos of birds in flight, some birds in flight can be identified with, maybe a wing up or wing down photo of that bird moving through the air. Without a doubt, though, as far as learning and grasping birds on the wing, it maybe one healthy way to look at it is it starts with raptors, because raptors in general are going to be a little slower moving. You can appreciate the relative wing beats, relative structure. Like, for example, I'm going to go on a tangent here for just a second. So sharp-shinned hawks and Cooper's hawks. And I'm almost like kind of a virtual show of hands for everyone who's going to be listening to this. How many of you find sharp-shinned hawks and Cooper's hawks challenging? And it's seriously, we're all human, this is normal. And one of the things to note about birds in flight is it is very important to look at shape. It's also very important to ignore size. This is something I tell people frequently all the time when I'm helping people grasp and understand the birds at Hawk Ridge is ignore size 100%. Because as soon as you see, let's say a sharp-shinned hawk and a Cooper's hawk are flying by together or separate, not together, what's going to happen is we're all going to be seeing the same thing. But unless if you have a bird that's near another object or another bird, you actually have no way of telling how big or small that bird is, right? It's like a standalone object, no point of reference, basically. So when you ignore size, the human brain is going to go into what's next, and that is the thing that's universal for all of us, which is the shape or the contour and the profile. Sharp-shinned hawks are going to be more compact-headed, a little stubbier-handed, typically more stocky-tailed. So that's a structural difference versus a Cooper's hawk that tends to be a little bit longer-handed, a little bit more kind of robust-headed, and a little bit more elongated-tailed, without ever saying words of big or small. Now, what I'm getting at, taking this one step further, and again, this is like my little happy place of looking at all these finesse things with raptors in flight, is look at how they flap. I'm a firm believer, this is a hawk watcher angle, but also with other songbirds too, that behavior is a field mark. It's not a tangible field mark, but it's a field mark that you can observe and appreciate when you watch birds, not just bird like glancing, but really, it's why they call it bird watching, right? Or birding, because you actually watch a bird for more than one moment at a time. And when you see a raptor flying or even a songbird flying, note how they flap. In general, sharp-shinned hawks are going to be quick and snappy in general. They flap with a lot of haste typically, and when they soar around, they oftentimes will soar for slightly shorter durations before they have to reaccelerate with little bursts of wing beats. In general, not always, but in general, Cooper's hawks tend to soar for slightly longer durations, and the wing beats tend to be a little bit slower than a sharp-shinned hawk because they're longer winged. And you can apply this rule of thumb for nearly every raptor and even, songbirds on the wing, if that makes sense to everyone listening. Just it's like a holistic way of looking at birds in flight. Maybe comparing a vireo to a warbler. Warblers are going to be quick and snappy. Vireos being a little bit larger are going to be slower flapping. Thrushes, we know what a robin looks like. American robin, state bird of Wisconsin, I should say, American robin. And in flight, how would you describe in your own mind an American robin? And what makes that different from maybe different types of blackbirds? So I'll get off my little teaching pedestal, but it's fun stuff to think about is how to look at birds in flight and what to make of it.
Yeah, and I'm assuming a great way to get kind of that repetition is at a place like Hawk Ridge where you can look and then talk to, an expert and be like, okay, I think I saw this. What did you see? And they might say, hey, did you get this specific thing? And then you can, really learn from there. I'm assuming that's a great way to do it.
Definitely. And this can be appreciated, depending on the timing of the season, each in our own backyards, truly, big yard, small yard, however. But going to areas where birds concentrate in larger numbers, at a place like Hawk Ridge, and I mean this in all respect too, of just, hey, go to a place where there are educators, where there's people, to the best of one's ability, pointing out birds. And there's a lot of times too, just saying, again, I'm also learning, like, you look at these little songbirds flying by, it's like, I don't know what it is. It's a warbler. And maybe you'll identify it by, maybe with luck of the draw, with knowing some of the calls with lots of practice, or maybe by a photo of it flying by. But a lot of times it's just, hey, enjoy the spectacle. And the more that you see, the more you realize you're actually recognizing what you're seeing. It just comes with practice. Beyond the Hawk Ridge overlook area, Duluth is actually pretty special. And I know that for friends who are listening that have been to the area, there's quite a few special birding hot spots that kind of wrap around the very tip of Lake Superior, both on the Minnesota side and on the Wisconsin side, like Wisconsin Point, for example, where the birds, whether or not they fly through Hawk Ridge, they may also funnel down some of these areas like Wisconsin Point. It's also a great place to appreciate morning flight and just the spectacle of birds moving through the air.
Yeah, definitely. We at Wisconsin Point's coming up on September, obviously, and well, it'll be in September by the time that's released, but it's Jaegerfest. If you've heard of Jaegerfest before, Eric.
Oh, I've been there a few times.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's an unofficial festival to try to look at the birds that are crossing over Lake Superior, heading southeast, I would say, is where they're going. You can get parasitic Jaegers, the occasional different Jaeger species, Sabin's gull. I think they usually turn up a Harris's sparrow, so that's a very cool time of the year for birds
Yeah,
migrating. I
very,
think,
very cool. But unfortunately, I believe it was last year, that was when the American flamingo showed up. So a bunch of
I
people
think you're
trying
right.
to do Wisconsin big years were up at Jagerfest when these flamingos showed up at Port Washington. So then a bunch of
Yeah.
them had to just like, do I leave? Do I stay? What do I do? So that was bad
There's
timing for them.
Was that
impromptu.
really Jaegerfest? I
Yeah.
thought that was much.
Yeah. There was.
Were they
It
that
was.
late, those flamingos?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, I remember some folks were yeah, we were all on the beach, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, code red. There's flamingos in another part of the state, and it's yeah,
Well,
yeah,
scatter.
yeah, yeah. And then just kind of hung out with whoever was there. I'm just staying in my home turf and just yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty
But
crazy.
it's pretty special, pretty amazing that they did show up though. Yeah, at Port Washington for sure.
Yeah, I doubt
Yeah,
that's gonna happen again this year.
Yeah.
yeah,
Random
definitely.
question. What do you think the Limpkins are gonna come through this fall? I thought they would kind of be here by now and we would be seeing them, but it doesn't seem like they're coming through.
Oh, that's a hard one. I mean, on an annual, right? Ugh, I don't know about even annual, but seems like on a somewhat on and off basis, there's a record here and there that's showing up with a little more regularity somewhere in the Great Lakes, Western Great Lakes areas. Who knows if they're going to come back or not? That's a good question. I sorry to interject too. One thing that just came to mind that totally needs to be mentioned about Hawk Ridge, actually. I can't believe I didn't even talk about this. So, talking about different birds, we focused on October a little bit. Didn't even mention there's winter finches that come through late October into November. Crossbills sometimes come through, snow buntings. Sometimes we get pine grosbeaks coming through. It's a very special window, but specifically what was going through my mind just now was broad-winged hawks.
Oh
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I mean, this is a kettling bird. This is like an iconic piece of Hawk Ridge, truly. Um, while at Hawk Ridge, they're more of an early migrant as far as the whole spectrum of fall migration goes. And specifically, usually it could be as early as the middle of September, but usually it's around the third to fourth week of September is when broadwing hawks typically peak in migration. And just to reflect on what we talked about earlier, guys, they come through for the same reason. They're flying south. They fly down the shore of Lake Superior, and broadwing hawks in particular, among other raptors, are one of the raptors that they want nothing to do with flying over water. Peregrine falcons, merlins, harriers, they're known for cutting across water on occasions, and they get kind of sneaky like that from a detection standpoint. They don't rely on thermals as much as broadwing hawks, where they're like land or bust pretty much is if you're a migrating broadwing hawk. And so during this very sacred and special time frame of hawk watching, again, third week, sometimes fourth week of September. Last year we had a weird push in early October, which is very late for them. The peak day Broadwings, it could be 5,000, could be 10,000. One of the years when I worked here, I think we surpassed just over 20,000 if memory serves in a single day. Broadwing hawks coming through, and sometimes depending on this is totally kind of grace of just the timing of the friends coming through. You could have like a super flight, or these peak days could be dispersed over several days. But basically, it's safe to say thousands and thousands of broadwing hawks come through third and fourth week of September on a typical annual basis. And just complimenting Jagerfest, for those listening, if you're looking to get involved with Hawk Ridge, experience Hawk Ridge, but also partake in the fun of what happens at Hawk Ridge during this peak migration, specifically of broadwings, but so many other species, lots of sharp-shinned hawks coming through in masses too, among others. Hawk Ridge has a festival, annual festival called Hawk Weekend, and that takes place the third full weekend of September. Essentially, more or less, I'm pretty sure it's often during Jagerfest. So what a lot of people do, myself included, some friends, is you might do like Jagerfest in the morning. I'm oftentimes now helping out with field trips in the morning, so hey, we might see you around. You never know at Jagerfest too, but basically, Jagerfest is tons of fun in the morning when Jaegers tend to be peaking as they come through the shoreline. And mid hawk watching, for those new to hawk watching, midday hours, late morning through mid-afternoon can be peak for hawk watching. And then in the afternoons and evenings at Hawk Ridge's Hawk Weekend Festival, they have kind of a social gathering, kind of a banquet type events. They have keynote speakers that come from around the country. It really is a special time. So if you're looking to kind of maximize your visit to Hawk Ridge, all September and October long, like I said, there's naturalists, but especially third full weekend of September. All the details are on hawkridge.org too. That's a great time to experience both kind of experts in the area, opportunity to see speakers, and there's just a lot of fun things going on at Hawk Ridge that time of fall. One thing I'm just thinking of too, I don't know if this is of any value, but like at Hawk Ridge, there really isn't like an actual building, but one thing that they do on a every fall basis for just a few months is they bring up a trailer. September and October is usually when it's
Okay.
available, and it's kind of how Hawk Ridge sells their merchandise. So they've got shirts, hats, field guides, locally made jewelry and art and stuff, all bird related, of course. And one of the things about Hawk Ridge being a nonprofit is that's how a considerable amount of their the income comes to pay for like the counters and everything is through some of it's through grants and donations, of course, but some of it comes from, purchases made to support Hawk Ridge, all the bling and that kind of stuff. So I don't know, it's just something kind of cool on the side note that makes Hawk Ridge happen every year. For those who might have limited mobility, whether it's in a wheelchair or just need some assistance getting around, Hawk Ridge is relatively level as far as where the main viewing area is from. The counting platform that like there's kind of an effort to bring questions to the naturalists and not talk too often with the counters because the counters are often very focused on the skies and all. They might help out, if it's a slower day of migration. But the naturalists are there to basically help with all questions that are kind of asked. And so for those getting around Hawk Ridge is basically like the parking area is along this pretty elongated stretch of road where from the road you don't really have to go up or down any steps to be at the main overlook itself. It's wheelchair accessible, which is good to note because every hawk watch is a little bit different like that. And then also too, just something to note for the viewers is that if you happen to have like lawn chairs, that I definitely recommend maybe considering bringing lawn chair along. Some people just kind of stand around for their entire visit. A lot of the regulars bring their own chairs because at Huck Ridge there isn't much for formal seating. There's these big kind of flat-topped boulders that you kind of pick a big rock and that's kind of your rock for the day. You might share it with other people or whatever. Alongside the paved road. There's some outdoor classrooms, which are like a series of in-ground benches that are more for like the school groups that come in for the kids to learn about raptors and migration and all. But from a visitor standpoint, their chairs are welcome. The other thing that is might be good to mention to other people is that Hawk Ridge lends out binoculars at no cost. So what you do
Oh,
is you can like show something that you don't want to part with, like AKA some keys or a license or something as collateral just for the time being. And we will gladly lend out binoculars, especially for those who, let's say someone comes there, whether you forgot binoculars or especially if someone is new to birding and is like, hey, I've heard about this hawk watch, but I have not even considered investing in binoculars. I know nothing about birding. Regardless of any reason, no reason is even needs to be given, but you just kind of swap something temporarily and we'll share binoculars for the duration of your visit at the overlook. And it's pretty special to see people who, are like new to even using binoculars. You might hold them differently or you're new to focusing and all, and we'll
upside
teach them
down.
yeah, yeah, all this stuff. So other thing to mention, I have not related to Hawk Ridge, but I have a nephew. He's 5 years old now. His name is Hudson. Or my brother and his wife, they live in Janesville, Wisconsin. Hudson is, he's my little birding buddy basically in life, and I've kind of taken him under my wing to teach him about birding, and so we occasionally go birding whenever we see each other. I got him his first little pair of binoculars, and half the time he uses them backwards. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, child, come on, we're gonna do this right, and we have a lot of fun
Good
birding
thing you
together.
have him, or he has you to keep him on the straight and narrow there. That's good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
yeah,
sure.
right.
Eric, how did you get into birding? And at what age did you start doing it? And then what was your spark bird?
It was the red-tailed hawk, wasn't it?
I'm imagining it probably was, but who knows?
Well, which Sparkbird was it? No, I'm just kidding. I don't want. No, so I've been into birding since I was little, actually. So long and the short, I've got a brother and a sister. We all had chores growing up. I actually grew up in Pewaukee, Wisconsin, so we're more or less neighbors. And and uh, so we had chores growing up, and one of my kind of casual responsibilities was, hey, take care of the bird feeders. And within my family, more family members are getting into the backyard birding scene, but I'm kind of the first birder in my family, so to speak, or the first obsessed birder, I guess you could say. And anyways, got to fill up the bird feeders and to answer your question. I found chickadees to be really endearing and fun. You fill up the feeders, and truly, whether you're brand new to birding or whether you're an avid birder, chickadees, especially within their range where they're normally found, chickadees are part of such a special backyard ambience where you cannot not smile as a person whenever you see chickadees. Like they're fun, they're sweet, they kind of whistle back at you if you whistle to them. And I think the tameness and the curiosity of chickadees did it for me personally, truly, when I was a little kid growing up. And at times I'd get the step stool out to reach up in the feeders. And then other thing, I have to do a shout out to three of my friends, close friends from over the years, Tom Pretzby, Paula Stick, and Tim Hahn, who you guys know. All three are close friends from years past, and basically my first job in life was working at Wild Birds Unlimited in Brookfield, and we got to know each other through that job actually, and keep in touch here and there throughout the year. And it's always a treat to see all three of them. And basically I think the three of us got more from just birding into, oh, this is like a kind of a whether you call it a life obsession or whether it's something that drives you, to just kind of your happy place on a daily basis. And it was fun personally. I'd say thank you to our friendships from over the years and working together, especially of just seeing how exciting birding is for others and catching that contagiousness, through the bird feeding store and all. So yeah, so the four of us go back a few years from earlier on.
That Wild Birds Unlimited had quite the crew working there at one time because Tom definitely went on to be a very prominent figure in the Wisconsin birding community as well. And I think that Tim and Paula still go birding a lot. So a lot of people there actually weren't just there because they wanted to have a job. They were very into birds and then went on to do great things. It's sort of like when you have a coaching staff in the NFL and all of them went on to be head coaches somewhere else. That's kind of what that Wild Birds Unlimited felt like.
Right, right. And actually, shout out to Tom. So I remember I was kind of going through, and we've all gone through this. Like you kind of go from backyard birder to you get the what's the word? The
Disease.
you get the pregnancy. You get the drive to like go beyond the backyard, whether it's a shy thing or whether it's just you're excited to go on the treasure hunt part of birding. And I remember talking to Tom a few times and Tim too and Paula, but especially like Tom, something about he was already into shorebirds at that time. We were similar age. And hearing about like you can identify shorebirds, like I was getting into sparrows at the time, but shorebirds, I was like, no kidding, man. Like you're doing that. So we talk a little bit about shorebird ID in the store, and before you know it, years pass and it's like you become, fluent with the topic. But it's fun to what's the word? To say thank you truly to friends from earlier years onward. Maybe you didn't even realize it at first, but just, people that provided insight on doing what you're doing in the current day because of friendships. You know what I mean by that?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
We were talking recently with Greg Miller, and we were talking about how a lot of times it's the people that you have the experiences with and not just the birds. You remember, oh, yeah, I saw my life or this when I was with that person, or this person told me how to get it. It's all sort of interconnected. No one can just go out and do it on their own and be really good at it right away. So everybody contributes to that little patchwork of knowledge and experiences that lead to a life in birding, I guess I would say. And I think to your point too, you have those little experiences with your backyard and then you want to continue to grow them. So all of a sudden, oh, there's this cool place in the state where you can see this bird. And then all of a sudden, oh, I'd really like to go to California to see the condors. And it just keeps going bigger and bigger and bigger.
I'm leading a
And
tour in Brazil.
yeah, until you're like, I'm leading a tour in Brazil, making sure to stay a safe distance away from the jaguars, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so birding is basically your full-time job, right, Eric?
Yeah, I'm a full-time tour leader for V.E.N.T. Yep.
Yep, which is
I
awesome.
mean,
And I know a lot of people, younger people that are into birding that want birding to be their full-time career. Do you have any advice for those people who are maybe kids or just looking to get into a job of birding?
Well, this is a special topic, and I mean that in all respect and positivity. Because being an effective and responsible tour guide, a lot of it is birding skills, but I would say even more of it by far is is people skills and kind of what's the word? Like you have to be you have to be able to work with personalities and um, time management is really important with leading an effective tour about even the little things, reservations, when the bathroom breaks are happening,
Yep.
like taking
Bathroom
care of
breaks are
people.
huge.
I
Huge.
I take so much pride in all my tours of, hey, I'm gonna let you know what's coming up the day ahead, as far as the gear to wear, the conditions, birds we're looking for. Hey, and I'll let you know when the bathroom break is or when the next one is, because it's like how I look at it is that this is when I'm showing people around on my many tours throughout the year, I'm responsible for their enjoyment of their birding vacation. That's sincerely like my goal is to make sure they have a good time. And to answer your question though, because this is a very important topic, and I know that it is something that is of interest to a lot of people. Being a good birding guide, a lot of it is knowing the birds, and it's very important to know the birds by sight and sound. And there's a lot more to it from a responsible standpoint. And I feel like being able to teach and being able to embrace the moments is one of the most sincere things about being an effective birding tour guide. I also have to shout out to one of my birding mentors, who I was actually just having lunch with a few hours ago. I'm not sure if you know Laura Erickson. She's kind of my birding mom, and taking me under her wing. I'm immensely grateful for just learning a lot from her, and truly she's one of those mentors in my life. But also one of the things that I remember and really took to heart years ago when I first met her when I was in college and was learning about, just what guiding is like and what teaching others about birding is like, is every bird is a teaching moment. And I really took that to heart. And that's one thing that I do actually reflect on. I'm not just saying that too when I'm doing tours of like, whether it's the ever common red-tailed hawk that we talked about, like, hey, it's not just a red-tailed hawk. Like, what's something cool about red-tailed hawks that we could talk about? And truly, that can be applied to every bird that you come across. And when you take it maybe even a little step farther, when you know what they call a sense of place about an area, talk about some of the trees, talk about some of the mammals, talk about maybe the ecology and things. But yeah, to answer your question, I feel like for those interested in being a birding tour guide, like more power to you, but just note that it's birding, but it's a lot more than just birding, and a lot of it is caring for people. It's not managing like in you're trying to keep things in an orderly kind of a scolding kind of way, none whatsoever, but it's a managing as in you need to be able to kind of manage day by day happenings and make sure that your experience that you're expressing and sharing with everyone is a special one beyond birding, you know what I mean? Birding
Yeah.
and beyond.
Yeah, definitely. And I would totally agree with everything that you said, as far as guiding and stuff. If people want to do a tour with you, where can they find your info?
Yeah, so the website for the company that I work for is called or it's Victor Emmanuel Nature Tours, also known as ventbird.com is our website, VENTBIRD.com. And we do tours all over the world actually. We got the continents covered. Other cool thing just to share, and I feel grateful for being part of their team just by saying this too. Sorry, there's a little chickadee that just showed up in my bedroom feeder. Um,
Perfect.
yeah, love those chickadees. V.E.N.T was the very first birding tour company in North America. So the company has a lot of pride in just running tours successfully over many years, and we're 2 years short of our 50th anniversary, actually, which is quite
Wow.
special of running tours formally. So that's pretty cool. But ventbird.com is our website.
Okay, great. I read Kingbird Highway by Ken Kaufman,
Mhm.
and it was pretty cool because he mentioned Victor Emmanuel doing a big day, and him kind of ended up on that big day with Victor Emmanuel and like going around and seeing how many birds they could find. And I think they broke like the record for at the time or something. But it was just really neat to I've heard you talk about, Victor Emmanuel Nature Tours and then hear about him kind of back in the day being a prominent figure in the birding community.
Definitely. He's um he's done a lot for birds, for birders, and I'm not just saying that too. One of the really special things that just from our let's say our meetings every few years Victor flies us to or flies the guides to Austin, Texas, where the company is based out of, and just to share we know we talk about all kinds of stuff and great event things, and one of the things that is so special to hear is Victor describe his passion and kind of his pride in how he created the first young birders camps years ago, and more power to just young birders out there. Seriously, keep birding, keep enjoying it, connect with so many friends. Just bird your heart out and enjoy it and learn with others. And one of the neat things about some of Victor's earliest young birder camps is some of the people that partook in the young birder camps have gone on to a pretty wide array of bird jobs, some in bird conservation specifically, and some have actually come into full-time V.E.N.T tour leaders, actually. So it's come full circle as far as them in their younger years. But he's had a very special, profound impact on a lot of people, both working for him and just people he's helped get into birding through the grapevine.
Awesome. Well, that's amazing. Anything else for Erik, Ryan?
No, I'm good. It's been great to hear all about your experiences and Hawk Ridge, and now I feel like we have to take a trip to Hawk Ridge at some point. So
You're at Hawk Ridge. I'm still at Brazil. I'm like, we got to go to Brazil
let's
now
take it
after
one step
hearing
at a
about all
time.
this.
Hawk
Yeah,
Ridge is,
right.
one state over. Brazil is a completely different continent.
I think there's room for both. But yeah, Erik,
Oh,
thanks
yeah.
so much for talking with us, and thanks to everyone for watching and listening to this episode of the Badgerland Birding Podcast.